So we were talking about genes and single gene disorders, or Mendelian disorders. With Mendelian disorders, you have autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant. Autosomal recessive is where you need two bad copies of a gene to get the disease. Both parents can be completely healthy and active. Mom is a brain surgeon and dad is a star athlete, and they both have a mutation in the same gene, and as chance would have it, they meet each other and fall in love and have children. Because the disease gene follows a recessive mode of inheritance, these two people have a 25% chance with each new pregnancy of having a child with a disease. In genetics, we use Punnett squares to calculate the risk. Remember that we have two copies for every gene. In the case of parents with mutation in one gene, the gene codes for a protein that doesn't work. The other gene codes for a protein that does all the work. There are other types of inheritance aside from autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant for Mendelian inheritance, but these are the two main ones that we're going to focus on. So it's estimated that the average person has between 6 and 30 recessive genes in their genome that they are not aware of. Whole genome sequencing, which we will talk about soon, involves getting the correct DNA sequence for all the genes. Eventually, some couples will use this technology for family planning to predict their chance of having children with these rare Mendelian disorders. So this is for autosomal dominant inheritance. This, again, is Mendelian genetics. Mendelian genetics means that there's one gene that's involved. A good example of a autosomal dominant inheritance type disease is achondroplasia, which is the most common form of dwarfism. There are over 200 types of dwarfism, and 70% of dwarfism is due to achondroplasia, meaning that the other 200 disorders are quite rare. And make up, all of the 200 together make up 30% of dwarfism. So in this case, patient needs only one bad gene to have the disease. One parent may be affected and pass their mutated allele onto their offspring. Both parents may be of normal stature. In this case, a new mutation occurred in the child during embryonic development. And obviously, each affected parent has a 50% chance of passing the gene on to their offspring. Genetics and the environment. When talking about genetics and disease, another big area here is complex gene disorders. Common diseases like diabetes and high blood pressure are due to interactions of many genes. We will find out that some common diseases are due to changes in small number of genes, whereas other diseases are due to changes in many genes, or dozens or maybe even hundreds of genes. A very broad way to look at disease is that all disease is either due to a patient's environment or their genetics. So when talking about complex gene disorders, we will in the future be talking about autism, epilepsy, and also common adult diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. So one important thing to discuss here is that the definition of multifactorial disorders is when you have changes in many genes plus changes that the environment has on genes together. This is called multifactorial. So what is your environment? When you think about your environment, it's more than what you think at first. Your environment can be the air that you breathe, viruses and bacteria, swimming in a pond, all the parasites, viruses, and bacteria in the pond. When you're outside, the sun is your environment. Your environment can be chemicals that you're breathing, the smoke around you, everything you eat and drink, every drug you put into your body. And also, dangerous radiation can be your environment. So there's environment also inside the body. blood pressure in arteries and veins, blood pressure that affects your heart, your kidneys, and your brain. Also, your blood sugar inside your body is your environment. Your cholesterol level is your environment. Your weight is also your environment. If you're 150 pounds versus 400 pounds, obviously your joints and your organs have a different environment that they have to adapt to and deal with. There's also environment inside the cells, which is the microenvironment. The pH, or the hydrogen ion concentration in the cells, can really change the way that cells act. Also, levels of free radicals and antioxidants in the cells, and also the levels of oxygen and ATP. So where am I going with this? The thing here is that your environment changes the DNA in your genes. Over years and years, your environment changes your DNA, and this can cause organ damage. It can cause your cells to die. Healthy cells become cancer cells for a lot of reasons, but some of them include DNA changes that affect the cell cycle and process of cell division. Cancer cells accumulate hundreds or thousands of mutations and grow to millions and millions of cells before we can detect them on a CAT scan or an MRI. So here are just a few of the ways that this can happen. So one example, this was in a paper in Nature on January 14th, 2010, a small cell lung cancer genome with complex signatures of tobacco exposure. Here they did sequencing on a patient who died with lung cancer. They sequenced her normal cells and they also sequenced her cancer cells. And they found, comparing the normal genome sequence to the cancer genome for that patient, they found 22,910 DNA mutations. And one DNA mutation they estimated occurred in the cancer cells for every 15 cigarettes that the patient smoked. Now, some of these mutations are kind of random and they don't really mean a whole lot, but there are a few of the 22,000 mutations that are very important and do radical changes to the cell cycle and make big changes in what happens in the cells, leading to cancer. So there are a couple of points here. All disease is either dependent on a combination of your environment or your genetics. Your environment changes your genetics, which leads to cell damage. And all cancer is essentially a genetic disease. Cancer occurs by chance or an inherited mutation or by accumulated genetic damage from an environment over time, such as the sun, the water that you drink, smoking, or drugs, etc. So we'll stop here and we'll continue on the next video.